I think I am officially calling it quits with moss poles. I kind of want to share a little bit more about my journey with moss poles and why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling and what I'm going to do moving forward. So if you don't know me at all, I have been growing plants on moss poles since 2021. The very first plant that I put on a moss pole, I actually still have, and it is right there. That is a beast, Monstera adansonii. I actually have my second plant on a pole still, that is Marble Queen. Over the years, I have grown a massive collection of climbing plants on moss poles. I made a dedicated video where I shared I had 37 moss poles at one point. That is literally insane. I don't know how I did it and I kept up with it. There's just something so special about comparing a small juvenile leaf to a massive, huge leaf that you would actually see outside growing up on a tree. It is literally insane. As much as I love these big leaves and growing these huge plants, that's not really why I have fallen out of love with moss poles. I would say the main reason is I just don't have the time dedicated to caring for them anymore. They require a lot of work, you guys. If you really truly want to get huge leaves and you want to put the time into growing big plants, it can be a lot of work with maintaining the pole as far as chopping it, as far as watering it goes, keeping up with feeding, and just everything is so much work. And the thing is, if you don't chop your plant in time and it grows beyond the top of the pole, it will size back down. So my number one main issue is I just don't have the time anymore. I water my poles twice a week. And they grow fast. They can climb very quickly and reach the top of the pole in no time. And that's the thing. It's like so many of my plants extended beyond the pole just because I didn't get to extend it in time. And not only that, it's just, what's the end goal, right? What is the end goal for you with moss poles? And for me, I never really knew what that end goal was. I knew that I liked them and I liked that I kept getting bigger and bigger leaves, but I also didn't know what the plan was down the road. And now that it is 2025, 4 years later from when I first started my moss poles, I don't know, my plant journey has changed so much in that time. Now, I am not getting rid of climbing plants. I'm not saying that. Like, I'm still gonna have plants climbing in my collection. They're just not gonna be moss poles. So I'm replacing moss poles. And when I say moss poles, I mean sphagnum. Sphagnum moss, where you actually have to DIY it. Make the pole, whether you use wire and make those, whether you use the clear poles, any kind of support. If it requires you physically wetting moss and adding that to a pole, I'm not doing that anymore. I am done with the sphagnum moss. These plants behind me that you see, they are still on sphagnum moss poles. And I have slowly, you guys, been getting rid of moss poles. I had 37, like I said, at one point, and I am down to these minus a few more here and there that are still on moss poles. I am going to break one pole down with you today. It's actually not here. It is out in the dining room, and I'll do that one with you today and maybe do a couple of extensions so you can get an idea of what I'm going to do moving forward. So a lot of the plants you see behind me, I am going to be transitioning them off a sphagnum moss pole. Can you still get big leaves without a moss pole? And that answer is yes. You want to know why? I have grown a couple plants in my collection to be massive without ever using a moss pole. And let me show you. Exhibit A is Philodendron xoxo red. And you guys, when I tell you this plant is massive, it is massive. These leaves are probably close to 1.5 feet at least long. Like, they're huge leaves. And do you want to know how long this plant has been in here? Since September of 2023. And all that I'm using are a couple garden stakes to help support the vine, because as this plant has climbed up, you can see how thick that vine has gotten. Two of the most important things that you need for large plant growth is going to be feeding nutrients. as well as the environment that they're kept in. Obviously, if they're kept in greenhouse-like conditions, more ideal conditions like they would out in nature, they're going to grow better. Now, this plant room here is south facing. It is very, very warm in this plant room most of the time. I have a little hydrometer right here, and the current reading temperature-wise is almost 76 Fahrenheit, and it is 55% humidity. It can fluctuate quite a bit in here. I've seen humidity as low as 40s, like low 40s. I've seen temperature as low as like mid 60s in here over winter. And over summer, I've seen it as high as like 83 degrees in here. So if you think about consistent 80-degree almost temperatures, upper 70s, these plants will thrive in that kind of environment. This plant is planted into pond substrate, semi-hydro. It's getting a constant supply of nutrients, and therefore this plant has been able to grow the size that it is. But yes, I have grown this plant huge in a year and a half, you guys, a year and a half, which is insane. All without a moss pole. And exhibit 2 is going to be Monstera albo. It's going to be a little backlit just because of the bright sun coming in, but I have grown this plant to be a pretty mature albo. It's got some massive leaves with secondary fenestrations. I actually chopped this on my channel and everything if you want to kind of get a better view of it. But I had it growing up on a pole, but it was just a clear pole without any moss inside. And it grew super tall. It was actually hitting the ceiling. And then I chopped it a few months back. I did a very big top section and I replanted it again in pond. And now it is climbing up a core pole. Cocoa core poles is just used for support. The plant is not going to actually grow its roots inside of here. You don't water this. It's basically like a stake. And these are stackable, so I can add multiple layers on. And again, it's just providing support, and there's no maintenance with this. I recently chopped this plant and put the top section in here. And because this plant didn't have any roots before chopping, I actually air layered it. And that's what I'm going to be doing a lot more now, is I'm going to air layer first to grow in some roots. I will chop it and then replant the base, and the plant will continue growing up and sizing up like it would if you were using sphagnum moss. It's just so much more convenient because you don't have to do anything with the pole. Like if I wanted to take my Monstera aria here and do a top section, I could literally just cut here on the vine, and it's growing out all these aerial roots that I probably could just chop that and stick it straight into a semi-hydro and it would grow fine. But if I wanted to kind of extra secure the cutting and make sure that it's not going to shock all the growth that you've gotten, I would probably air layer it just to grow in some extra roots, and then you can replant it. I don't know, I just love pond. I can't say enough good things about semi-hydro, and I just want to put so many more plants in pond. The thing with poles is once these poles kind of get crunchy and dry, like they're not at that point yet. I will have to water these probably tomorrow or the next day. So there's only so many days beyond when the pole gets crunchy that I would need to water, or the plant is just going to get super dehydrated because it has all these extra roots inside that you need to keep hydrated. While I'm still talking, let's go ahead and extend one. This is Philodendron gigas. I need to water the base, it's thirsty. But gigas is climbing on a clear pole without any moss. I have huge leaves growing. Look at the size of those already. And it is just barely starting to grow. Like, it's not a very big pole. These were the beginning leaves, and now I have huge leaves. And the only thing I have to do is water the base. I don't have to water the pole. And it's just, it makes plant care so much easier. So I'm just putting together a clear pole. I'm just snapping it here. I feel like if you have a small plant collection and you have like a few poles, then like it's not really a problem. It's just when you get to have a massive collection and a lot of plants and plant care, the last thing, like I dread moss pole work now, you guys. It's sad because I used to really look forward to it, and I just love to do it. But after you have collected so many plants, you realize that, or at least I have realized that I just want a collection that I can easily maintain and just appreciate the growth and not have to put so much care into the plant. Like my El Choco that I showed you, I love, this is probably one of my favorite plants in here now, and it's so huge, it's so beautiful. And I can just, it's in pond and I just add water, that's it. It makes it so much easier. Like I always knew that there was going to be an end goal to, or like an end point to my moss poles, because I knew I couldn't keep up with it forever. I think over the last year or so, I really just began to feel burnt out. And I think that's because I opened a plant shop too. So half of my time is spent on YouTube, the other half of the time is spent on my plant shop. And I just, like I said, I just don't have the time into maintaining a lot of my own plants in my collection. Because I have a huge collection, I think it would be different if I had like less than 100 plants. But since I'm pushing probably over 250 and probably another 400 if you count all my tiny plants, it's a lot to care for. Since she is at the top here, we're just going to slide this empty pole on. There is a top and a bottom to these poles. These are the soil flaps. These are thickly poles. There's a little flap here that you bend down if you were planting this on the bottom, but since you're connecting it, you're just going to be pushing this flap that's on this one into this one so that it connects. So you just slide it on the inside. Okay, and then you're gonna push these flaps in. Okay, so now when you go to grab it, it's connected, it's not moving. And these ones open from the front, so the vine that's climbing, you don't have to. You can just secure it with Velcro if you wanted, but there's little flaps here that you can actually undo, and you flap it around the plant. Or you connect the vine that way. You just push it on the inside. So I flapped it on the inside, so the vine is kind of on the inside now, and then this part is on the outside of it. So the flap is just holding the vine in place. So now we have extended our gigas, and we're gonna have to find a spot for her because she was in my IKEA cabinet and she's not gonna be able to fit back in there now. So that's the plan for a lot of my plants. I probably won't be sticking to these clear poles forever. I'll probably use them for plants that tend to stay more on the smaller side, but for plants that get huge leaves, like some of these big phylos, I'll probably end up just using a stake or a core pole. And since I do have a plant shop now, I plan on propagating a lot of my phylos and stuff back to make small plants. And it's gonna be so much easier because I can just do like a top cutting, or I can take like a few nodes, propagate them. My plant is going to regrow, and it won't ever get all crazy because I'm always going to be chopping it, if that makes sense. And it's so much easier to take cuttings when you don't have to deal with moss, because a lot of the time the roots in the actual moss poles, they're dried up because for me, I underwater them so much. And it's not really a healthy root system, so I would rather reroot the plant, like reroot a healthy cutting. So yeah, it's just gonna be so much easier for me, and then I can still appreciate the big, beautiful leaves because it's getting those good conditions being in here, and I'm feeding every time I go to water. This one's in my soil mix, so I just have to make sure to fertilize well every time I water. Whoops, my camera overheated. I don't know what I was saying now. I was just watering this really quick while it cooled down. And yeah, it's just gonna be so much easier for me, and I need the lower maintenance of not having to water moss all the time. And you know, another reason why I don't like moss is, one, it makes a mess everywhere. When I go to water the poles, even though I have a mat down, I still spill water everywhere. And the moss gets everywhere. And you know what else loves damp moss? Fungus gnats. They will lay eggs into your moss poles. I'll probably have the plants exactly how they are now. They're gonna have big leaves. They're just gonna be on a different type of support system without having to water moss. I think it's definitely come from just years and years of trying to keep them watered and chopped and looking good. I feel like you can only do it for so long before you, I don't know, before you realize like, okay, because what's the point? Like if you grow these huge, massive plants, I feel like most people don't have room for tons and tons of massive, huge plants in their collection. Even me, like I have a lot of big plants, but I'm running out of room because a lot of them are getting huge. So I kind of have to like pick and choose, like, okay, which ones do I want to actually let grow to maturity? Maybe some I'll just keep smaller in my collection, keep chopping it back, and I'll just keep a smaller plant for me. That way I can still appreciate it and still like enjoy having a lot of my plants, because I do love so many plants and I love having a large collection because I love plants. Okay, this is my Just Sienna moss pole. And we're going to be getting rid of her. Not getting rid of her altogether. We're gonna take a top section, replant it with a stake, but we're getting rid and chopping up the rest of the plant. Turned you around the other way because the light was kind of coming in bright. So where I'm gonna chop is there is a big aerial root here. So I'm gonna chop under. Yes, because I don't want to take any of these leaves. I'm going to chop right here where my finger is on the vine, in between. So I'm going to cut some of this wire where this root system is, just so I can work with this top section. I'm going to cut all the way around here. I should be able to lift this off. Okay, so this is going to be our top section that we are going to keep and let grow up a stake. You can just see a lot of growth on the bottom. It's just not happy. It's gone through so many periods of being underwatered and everything. I feel like I'm just going to appreciate her so much better not being on an actual moss pole. I just wanted to show you, I have 2 Just Sienna plants. This is my mama plant. So this is actually what I started my moss pole from. I took a couple clippings and let them climb with a moss pole. So I have like a second plant of her that I started too, because I'm always going to be propagating her to have small plants to sell. So I really don't even need one climbing. So I considered just not letting her climb anymore, but I kind of do really love these big leaves that are this color, this pattern. So I think that's the only reason why I want to keep that top section to climb, because I do really love the coloring on Just Sienna. So yeah, the plant will have grown a decent little root system in the moss, but a lot of the times I find the roots will have like shocked because of being underwatered so much that it'll grow in new roots, but still like a lot of the old roots just kind of rot off. And so they're not really viable. Okay, so this is what usually the root system will look like after being in moss for a period of time. The ends are kind of rotted. They get stringy like this here. It's just not a healthy root system at all. That's crazy. Look at all those aerial roots on that vine. That's so cool. So I'm kind of thinking of just sticking this in water for the time being and letting it grow in a healthy root system before I pot it up. Because if I try potting it up in my substrate, I mean, I could pot it up, but I kind of feel like a lot of these roots might just, I don't know. I just don't like potting up unhealthy roots. I'm tempted to just cut all these off. They just don't look healthy. This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna cut all the roots. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this leaf just so the plant isn't spinning, just so the plant can focus on rooting. I'm just gonna go ahead and, this one will probably yellow anyway. Okay. We're gonna keep this aerial root and then we'll pot this into probably like a 6-inch plant pot once it actually starts to grow some healthy roots, and this will be our top part of our plant. So we'll just grab a vase of water. I'll probably just stick this back in my plant room on the floor so it can root up, but there she goes. This leaf is so pretty. Look at that. And then, like I said, I will work on chopping all that up. I'm just gonna do that in my own time off camera because yeah, it's just, I literally just cut the vine away. I cut all the roots and just chop all the leaves off and throw the nodes in a little prop bin with moss. I don't know. I might just use moss or perlite for the propagation. So yeah, I hope that kind of helped explain a little bit why I'm doing this and how I've been feeling lately with my moss poles. Honestly, it's just the time it takes into maintaining a moss pole. And yeah, I loved it at one point, but I just don't have the time anymore. And even if I did have the time, I honestly probably don't think I could have kept up with it, with the chopping and extending and the watering all the time. I just want to enjoy caring for the plants in my collection. And if I feel like I'm not enjoying it and I'm just like quickly watering it, if I'm not appreciating the plant, then why do I have it? Do you know? I don't want to keep it in my collection just to keep it if I'm not in love with it. And it's perfectly fine to go through phases in your plant journey. You may like something at this point and do something and then completely change your mind later. Just how much I love pond now, and I didn't branch out and try pond until the kind of like midway through 2023, and now I love pond so much. And so it's nice to try and branch out and try different things, because if you don't try, you won't know. And I think that's my only regret, is not trying pond out sooner, because I freaking love it so much. And my plants love it, and I can get these huge, ginormous plants in my collection just by growing in pond and giving it a constant supply of nutrients. So yes, if you are struggling with moss poles, or maybe you clicked on this video because you wanted to know someone's thoughts behind caring for moss poles for a few years, I hope this maybe kind of guided you in a direction. And again, if you are wanting to try moss poles and you haven't tried, maybe you'll love it. Definitely try it. Like, I loved it at one point, but again, just think down the road, am I really going to be able to keep up with chopping them all the time? And yeah, it's just a lot of maintenance to keep up with. And I'm really happy with just keeping them growing on a stake and just maintaining them, because I am going to be chopping them back for the foreseeable future to always be having propagations. And I may start a second plant to chop back if I really like my mother plant. Maybe I don't want to always chop it back, so I'll restart like a second plant to have props from, if that makes sense. So yeah, that is the thoughts on my moss pole journey. It's sad to see the pole era come to the end, but I'm excited for the stake era. I'll probably do a lot of this other pole stuff probably in my own time. I may take one and do like a plant chores video, but I don't think I'm going to make a dedicated pole video, because it's going to kind of be the same process. And a lot of these I'm going to grow out first a little bit more before I decide to chop them and replant them. But I'm going to keep you updated on how my poles are doing and my plant updates and everything that I have. So yeah, just keep in mind, I'm still going to have plants climbing. I'm still going to have big leaves. They're just not going to be using moss. Yeah, definitely leave me your thoughts down below and what you think. I know some of you like moss poles and some of you despise moss poles. So I've just kind of phased out, you know, I'm just ready to move on to something that's more easy. So yes, I appreciate you guys. Again, thank you so much for watching and for being here, and I will talk to you later.